We're continuing our exploration of conflict theories with W.E.B Dubois, who is one of the founders of sociological thought more broadly and the founder of race conflict theory. We'll discuss shifting ideas about race, Dubois' idea of double consciousness, and the modern-day field of racial identity. We'll explore the idea racial formation and discuss Dubois' survey of African Americans in Philadelphia to look at how economic, political, and social structures affect how we perceive different races, and vice versa. We'll also discuss the activist side of Dubois' life as co-founder of the NAACP and editor of The Crisis, and how modern-day sociologists study racial politics and racial resistance. W.E.B Dubois was a highly decorated and accomplished sociologist and one of the first proponents of race conflict theory. He began his work at a time when race was considered a purely biological differentiation. After Dubois experienced the differences in how he was accepted and perceived in places such as the American South and Europe, he began to consider his own racial identity. He then began exploring the idea of double consciousness, his feelings of being both an American and a black man in America, and the way being a part of the non-dominant race created a fractured sense of identity. This concept led directly to his work in race conflict theory. In addition to racial identity, Dubois also did extensive research into the societal differences in the lives of black and white Americans. What he discovered flipped the notion of racial superiority, the common belief of the time, on its head and instead showed the problems in black communities were centered around racial prejudice. His conclusions showed that race only had power through what was given to it by society. These ideas eventually led later sociologists to formalize an idea called racial formation theory, which contends that the concept of race came about as a tool to justify and maintain the political, social, and economic power by those of European descent. Dubois' studies also influenced the modern work of looking at class as well as race, and the societal structures that exist in black communities that keep them relegated to a certain social class. Dubois moved beyond just an academic look into racial identity and became a political activist and writer, co-founding the NAACP, and becoming the leading force and editor of the association's magazine The Crisis. The NAACP and The Crisis used journalism and lawsuits to reveal the atrocities and injustices of racial prejudice in America, and ultimately helped to usher in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Much of the theories and work that W.E.B Dubois began continues today with modern sociologists. While racial relations and conflicts have changed since Dubois' day, they are still present, and it is important for us to recognize these problems and continue to work to solve them.